My BMW E46 car doors no longer unlock when I push these buttons, so we have to replace the battery inside of this key fob. I'm first going to have to cut it open, making sure not to damage the circuit board that's inside. The car key has now been opened. You can see here the old battery. We need to replace this old worn out battery with the new battery you've seen here. I'll include the part number in the description. And the old battery has now been removed from the circuit board. This took some work with the knife here. Solder connections on the new battery do not mate with the solder connections on the board. On the board here we have solder connections at corner number 1 and corner number 2. Those are approximately 90 degrees apart from one another. In the case of the new battery, solder connections are 180 degrees from one another. As a result, I'm going to remove the solder connections from the existing new battery, and I'm going to try to use this original solder connection joint from the PCB with the new battery. With the soldering iron, I used one of the solder connections from the new battery to reattach the base connection point onto the PCB. And now I am able to insert my battery and make sure that I can lock and unlock my car doors. Being certain to place the positive side up, the new battery can be placed inside the key fob. Pressing the joints together now, I can press these buttons and ensure that this locks and unlocks my car door. I already checked earlier that everything does function as expected without any additional reprogramming, so I can now put my key fob back together. I'm going to use some moldable epoxy to reassemble my key fob. In order to do this, this epoxy has to be thoroughly mixed, mixing the center lighter epoxy with the darker epoxy around the perimeter, and then we can apply this to the edges of the key fob and adhere everything back together. Our epoxy is now applied around the perimeter. We can push the two pieces together now and wait for this epoxy to dry. The key's been adhered back together now. It didn't turn out so beautifully, so now I'm going to have to paint this gray surface after having sanded it. The paint I'm going to use is meant for vehicles. I used this in an earlier video to paint the exterior trim on the same vehicle. So with the BMW emblem taped up, I'm going to give this a new fresh coat of paint. It may look better than it ever has before. And here it is, the finished product. Looks pretty good. Let's see if it works. Unlocked and locked, everything's functional.